back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have a pretty fun guest, Susan Hess Logeais. Susan is the filmmaker behind the recent Way of the Psychonaut film. And, this is not just an epic film. This is, film with a lot of extras. So, long and short, Susan worked with Stan very closely on this documentary. And this is the best documentary on Dr. Stan Grof I've ever come across. And I'm just really thankful that Susan was able to work so closely with Stan to make that happen. So, where do you even begin? We've needed this documentary for a long time. Susan was able to kind of pair it in with a nice story about herself a little bit too, and the hero's journey and all this kind of interesting and helpful stuff for getting a good frame around the lifetimes and work of Stan Grof. So we recently hosted a live stream with Susan and a friend of the show, Emma Bragdon, who runs the IMHU, Integrative Mental Health for You. I do a lot of education over there too. So we were able to partner together, do a really cool live stream film screening, followed by a panel discussion that featured Susan and Emma and Kyle and I. It's really awesome. So much fun. A lot of people came out for it. I think you can actually now scoop this film up all over the place. It's streaming all over. So if you want it, jump on in. And if you're confused by the work of Stan Grof, this is a great place to start. There's a lot of sections of this film that I probably plan to use when discussing certain Grof concepts from now on. And if I'm ever running weekend retreats, if we're ever able to do that again, this actually might be a great film to show the night before doing breath work on the Saturday. So typically that would be a Friday night, and everybody can relax, watch the film, discuss it, and then do breath work the next day. Yeah. So anyway, I'm really just very grateful for Susan putting in so much time and attention to this project, and thankful it's out there and everybody can watch it now. And I think it's pretty affordable too. So, much less than normal documentaries on a lot of these platforms. So just go out, get it, watch it with a friend or two, and spread the word. It's amazing. And I hope you like this interview with Susan. Susan's had a lot of interesting experiences to share. And all those extras I was talking about before, there's so many outtakes, not outtakes, but I guess B-roll with people who are featured in the film. And that's available as well. So to check all this stuff out, just Google Way of the Psychonaut or search Way of the Psychonaut, and you'll find the film there. I believe it's wayofthepsychonaut.com. And you can find out everywhere where it's streaming, and you just buy it or rent it or whatever you want to do. But definitely get your hands on and watch it. It's awesome. And you will not regret watching it. So stuff going on over here, Psychedelics Today. We have launched sales for Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists, our 8-week live supported program that is unbelievable. You will have all sorts of tools when you're done to be able to work with your clients more carefully around, illegal or legal sessions that they had in the past. You'll be able to help them much more than you could before getting any kind of in-depth training. We've had so many 5-star reviews on this class that it's kind of daunting. It's really humbling to realize that we put together something so great. So, you can find it at psychedelic-education-center.com and learn all about it there. Feel free to ask us questions. There is a student discount that is available for Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. You just got to reach out to us for that. And if it's too much money, let us know. Maybe we can work something out. We do like to help younger folks or young professionals take this kind of stuff so they can understand where better to go with their psychedelic career. A lot of people are like, I just want to be involved professionally. And, that doesn't really mean enough. You have to kind of understand the landscape and the philosophy and the ethics a little bit before you can just say, oh, I want to be, maybe I want to help with research design, or I want to help with ethics or whatever it is. Like there's plenty of roles for people out there. And our class is very helpful for people trying to find their space. Yeah. And I think that's it for now. Again, it is on sale, Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists. You can learn more at psychedeliceducationcenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com. And yeah, please reach out to us if you have any questions about it. Psychedelicstoday email at gmail.com or hit us up online, maybe in the Facebook group. So facebook.com, just search for Psychedelics Today group and you'll find it there. So I hope y'all enjoy. And we'll see you on the other side. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Susan Hess Logeais, filmmaker, creator of the recent film, Way of the Psychonaut, Stanislav Grof's Journey of Consciousness. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely happy to have you here. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you got curious about Stan Grof's work?
Well, I had a very active spiritual life prior to having children, which I sort of had to shut down in order to become pregnant. And it wasn't until they were adolescents and I was in my 50s that I wanted to reconnect to this spiritual practice. And it didn't work anymore. And I started thinking, well, psychedelics opened me when I was much younger. Perhaps if I could find them again. But as a middle-aged woman, mother of 2 kids, I was afraid of getting arrested I didn't know where to go or how to do it. And so I started researching and I discovered Stan's website and all these papers about the 4 perinatal matrices and holotropic breathwork and his early research with high doses of LSD. And it just seemed like he had so much information that if I could connect with him, and I noticed there was a workshop that I could attend and hear him speak, I felt that that would unlock something for me.
Yeah, I think that is somewhat similar to my story with him too. Well, not really anything regarding pregnancy, but just like there's something there that seemed like it could be really helpful. It was really, really interesting and really different from everything else I was seeing in the world.
Absolutely. The thing that really struck me was, I think we recognize that there are influences that are not dictating, but maybe behind the things that we do, the reactions that we have, the choices we make. If anyone has done psychedelics or have had spiritual practices, there may be past life memories that appear or a sense of a connection to someone that goes back over, not necessarily this lifetime, but another, or even connections to ancestors. And so there's this whole dimension of consciousness that Stan seemed to embrace and explain.
Yeah. So from there, like obviously you get to spend some time in that world. What was the thing that made you want to make a film? Like I have to say first before you jump in that this is my favorite film on Grof and his work. So thank you for that. So like you clearly had to put a lot of work in to get to where you did with it.
Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. And I guess the thing is that as I started to get to know Stan and interview him and learn about his years at Esalen, it just became clear to me that, I guess when I met Stan and heard him speak and heard what he spoke about, tantric science, mythology, Eastern spiritual traditions, even quantum physics, shamanic journey work. There were so many things that he spoke about that I had explored on my own before I met him. And then in the course of making the movie, I realized that he had introduced many of those concepts during his 14 years at Esalen. And so I was resonating with him on a level, it's like he was impacting my life before I met him. And so when it came time to make the movie, I was tapping into what I had already learned and then just deepening that understanding through our interview process, through the reading of his books, and through my deep psychedelic high dose sessions.
Hmm. Yeah. And did you have filmmaking experience before?
Oh yeah. I mean, I made a documentary about two sisters. One's a quadruple amputee. It's called SOAR,
Mm.
SOAR, and it was on PBS. And I previously had done a full length feature as a producer, so something that I wrote and produced. So I've had filmmaking experience, but this was the first one that I was, entirely pretty much on my own. Uh,
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. And Stan was like, I've seen some other documentaries, and they're just really disappointing. Like weird music tracks the whole time, like really bad filming. Didn't necessarily seem like they had as much access to Stan as you did. I suppose being in the West somewhat helps a little bit because you could go down to Esalen or like San Francisco or CIS to kind of get in the know a little bit more.
well, yeah, he was at the time he was half of the year in Germany and then periodically in the Bay Area. So every few months I would fly down, and there was a period where my son was in school, his senior year at a boarding school, and so boarding didn't work. So we rented this small house, and my husband and I took turns living with him, and so that put me an hour and a half away from Stan. That was perfect. I was driving up there a few times a month, and that's when a lot of work really, really went deep. So, and I have to say that Stan is a co producer of the movie.
Mm.
And our process was writing a screenplay. I mean, I wrote the screenplay and then Stan would read it. And even though it's a documentary, I wanted to very clearly spell out how we would tell his story so I knew what to film. There's a lot of reenactment footage. I wanted to show what Stan was doing instead of just, interview him and have him describe it. And so he would then, look at what I was describing and tell me where it felt shallow, wasn't deep enough, wasn't complete enough. And then I would film these sequences, edit them together, and Stan would review them. And one thing he said, we were trying to show what an insulin coma looked like.
Mm.
And I found archival footage, but I didn't have the right to use it. So we had to reenact it. And so,
Oh,
yeah. And so Stan was watching it and he was going, wow, that sugar is flowing so quickly down that tube. And so that was, we had to slow it down,
mm.
afterwards. But he would just comment on some of the specifics. We show an electro, they, as they give the insulin shot prior to the coma, Stan was disturbed because we didn't clean the spot with an alcohol swab before
Oh,
the
right.
injection.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, that sort of thing. It's like, okay.
It's a great level of detail, though.
Oh,
And it's had to be super helpful to like go, oh, cool, you didn't get this historical part wrong. You got it right. Great.
well,
And yeah.
I mean, our kids went to a Waldorf school, and a
Ah,
lot of a lot of the conflict comes because people are trying to interpret what Steiner meant, and and so that's difficult. It's in German, and then it's translated, and who did the translation, and is it accurate? And in this instance, what a privilege to have Stan alive to look at what we did and make sure that it was accurate.
right. Yeah. How much of a blessing is that? It's amazing. And that's one of the reasons I think he's such a valuable teacher is that he's been around for so long. He's mm, quite old, in his 80s, perhaps.
Stan
And
will be 90 July 1st of 2021.
all right. Yeah. So that's extraordinary. That's, I don't think we had Freud live that long. He clearly died from mouth cancer a lot earlier than that. And I'm just really thankful Stan was able to hang out this much longer to help us kind of further his work and understand it better.
Well, and in the course of making the documentary, I interviewed the people that I had found prior to meeting Stan, but learned later how influential he had been in their lives, among them Fritjof Capra and Rupert
Oh,
Sheldrake
cool.
and Ralph Metzner and Michael Harner. And so then later to sit down with Rupert Sheldrake and for Rupert to say that what Stan did that was so powerful was he brought together these people with these new innovative perspectives, but in a setting where no one felt judged for imagining something different. And so it created the possibility for these new ideas to percolate. Whereas if, in a normal academic setting, they would have been shut down immediately because it was challenging this paradigm.
Right. Right. And I think that's why a lot of us really fantasize about this Esalen landscape, right? Because ideas weren't shut down, especially interesting ideas that had some validity or some usefulness, right?
Absolutely. Rupert was influenced by Krishnamurti, and then later was in conversation with David Bohm, and so David Bohm, from his quantum physics perspective, the idea of fields of information, so that we're yes, we're a physical entity, but that all the genetic information that determines how a species develop isn't necessarily held in the physical dimension. It's actually held in dimensions that are either directly connected to the physical or not, like nonlinear or beyond space and time. So it's fascinating to consider the physical world as a piece of something greater. And Stan understood that so wonderfully from his years of working with Fritjof Capra.
Right. Yeah. His partnership with Fritz Capra, apparently it's Fritz for short, by the way. It's interesting to me.
Okay.
I found that a couple of years ago. Yeah, his collaboration is really interesting. Some of Fritjof Capra's earlier work was assigned reading in my undergrad.
Oh, really?
So I was getting exposed to this stuff like on the very opposite side of the country, in very rural New Hampshire, right? But without much community to unpack this stuff with. So when I found the holotropic breathwork community in Vermont, I was really, really blessed to be able to dig in with people who had been around this stuff far longer than I had. Really helpful.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, and it echoes what Rupert Sheldrake was saying. And that's why psychedelic explorations can be not dangerous, but if you want to get the full value out of this deep exploratory work, it's very important to have people around you who can support what it is that you discover.
Right. Yeah. And this is a thing we've been talking about a lot lately is integration, psychedelic integration. To me, it's almost talked about too much because I'm kind of getting bored, but I think it's important because there's a lot of people that don't know about it yet. But the fact that you've got a different mindset now and can't go back to your same friends and talk about those same things, like that's kind of a big problem. You can't talk about those experiences safely with your friends or your family. Perhaps that's one of the big issues around psychedelic integration. But when you have this community where you can share these things honestly, openly, like there's something really there and different than what's typically available to folks when they come out.
Well, and what it illustrates actually is that our whole education system is operating in a dying paradigm that reflects only the understanding of this physical dimension, but ignores the dimensions beyond space and time. And the concepts from quantum physics, from Rupert's work with morphic resonance and morphogenetic fields, or even spiritual traditions from the East that recognize the spiritual nature of humanity, the idea of an Akashic field that Ervin Laszlo explained so beautifully, where everything that ever was, never will be exists. And so the possibility of entering this collective memory of the world, and whether it's in our own planetary system or another. So when a psychedelic or a profound spiritual experience opens you, a holotropic experience, I'll call it, non-ordinary state of consciousness, opens you to one of these possible experiences, then you can't come back to what was. And if that's not embraced by the culture, you begin to think you're going crazy, and then you dismiss it as just a fantasy.
Right. Makes me hopeful that perhaps there will be an iteration on Waldorf schools, given the developments in the post-Esalen era and all this psychedelic stuff. Could be really nice to see that evolve a bit.
Oh,
I
definitely.
love Steiner's work. It's just a bit old. That's all.
Well, and imagine if concepts from quantum physics were taught beginning in grade school.
Mm.
What about the idea of some of the cultures, indigenous cultures, and the attribution of spiritual qualities to the natural world? There's a beautiful book by, I think it's David Peat, called Blackfoot Physics. And it talks about the relationship of the first peoples with the natural world and the agreements they made to honor these energies and the practices that they would respect, the rituals that they would do to honor that agreement. And then nature would provide for them what they needed to survive. So, perhaps for us to survive on the earth moving forward with climate change, we have to circle back or spiral back to a relationship with the natural world that recognizes there's intelligence to respect and interact with.
Yeah. Right. That would be a very interesting development. I'd love to see someone try that out. It seems really interesting. Like, yeah, just the being able to get a grip on paradox, like the paradoxical nature of a lot of these things in physics and quantum physics, et cetera. Like getting a grip on that from age 5 would really, I think, improve physics, or at least give us a lot more people in the physics space that could work with this stuff better, perhaps, than people that had to bridge their old paradigm thinking in.
Well, I look at my son who's 21, 22 now. And of course, I wasn't thrilled as a mother when he was exploring certain substances. But as an adult now, with a more responsible understanding, when I learned that he'd had a psychedelic experience, I asked if he would experience breath work as well. And what he got out of it was a perhaps more profound experience through breath work than he had gotten from the psychedelics. And so my goal in that was to say, if a psychedelic could open you to this deep dimension of yourself and possibilities of reality, then breath work can too. And so I find that younger people more easily expand into this understanding and can embrace it. And that the older we get, the harder it is, because we have so many habits and patterns of perspectives, behaviors. It's a little harder to let those go.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to jump back to your film and kind of just give people a slight teaser of maybe the arc of the film.
Okay.
So it kind of like balances your story and brings in a lot of Stan's history along with his work, right? So everything as far back as like Nazi occupied Prague, which that kind of slipped my mind somehow that ever even happened. I always just assumed it was Soviet. I kind of didn't totally catch the fluid borders back then, or occupations maybe. And yeah, all the way through Esalen and into kind of current day Stan, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It, when I met Stan and learned about his childhood growing up under the Nazi occupation of Prague and then the communists. There was a story that I was trying to make it tight and keep moving forward. And Stan reminded me of this man, Reinhard Heydrich. He was considered the architect of the Holocaust. And the only high level officer of the Nazi party was killed by Czech resistance fighters who dropped in from England. And they managed to wound him that led to his death. And Hitler killed 5,000 innocent Czechs in retaliation. And Stan was 12 years old when that happened. And he remembers a siren going off he thought it was every few minutes. And that signified that another Czech citizen had been killed because they were trying to force the Czech people to give up these resistance fighters who were trying to get out and were trapped in the city. So, and then you mentioned that my story is woven into this. As I would be sitting there and Stan would be describing his frustration with current schools of psychology not accepting the capacity of a fetus to remember its time in the womb.
Yeah.
And I said, but that's nuts, Stan, because, when I was pregnant with my son, I was shot at and I had nightmares about it. And then when my son was, I imagined hiding during my nightmares. Where would I hide? And then when our son was born and he was old enough to play hide and seek, we could never find him. He hid in the most amazing places. And so I said, of course he got that from my experience. He wouldn't sleep at night. He'd be very agitated. Well, that's when I had the dreams. That's when I was getting flooded with adrenaline, reliving this experience. And then other things like the birth of my daughter, it took 30 hours. It went on forever. And then after her birth, we would go to something called Gymboree, and they had these little like hoop things that kids would crawl through. She would not go in it until I took her to see an osteopath. And when he put his hands on her head with absolutely no pressure, she started screaming. It went on for about 3 minutes. She fell asleep. And after that, no problem. So it was so clear to me that these things had impacted my children. It was just ridiculous, that this would be dismissed. So it became clear that if I showed examples from my life, it would help to prove what Stan was suggesting through his theories and observations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of great that you had that personal experience. It's certainly troubling when we teach that the perinatal matrices and birth having an impact on humans. Like, it's always touchy. And I think for a good reason. Like, it's certainly a complicated topic, but I think there's a lot of validity there. And it's the human's first experience of massive forces, relative to their body.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I mean, even the good womb, why are mothers supposed to read to their unborn babies? Why are you supposed to listen to beautiful classical music? Why would you if it had no impact on your baby?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great point. Yeah. And that was around a lot longer before we even started thinking about the birth process at scale, I think. Yeah. It's a great point.
Well, and Ralph Metzner, we filmed a conversation between Ralph and Stan, and Ralph was talking about the unfortunately ugly nature of humanity, the ugliness behind the Holocaust or genocide, the horrible things that humans are capable of doing to each other. The way we slaughter animals, in fact, grow them, raise them in factory farms, and then slaughter them, treat them so cruelly with such disrespect, mow down forests without any concern. Ralph was saying, what kind of a species are we that we can be so cruel? And then he imagined, what if the birth process was peaceful? like
Yeah.
a water birth? What if we tried to minimize the trauma of that experience so that we weren't coming out thinking somehow that we had to fight against this power that was greater than us?
You said this is Ralph Metzner was saying
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Interesting. That would be a really interesting thing. And I think we need to do more research. I don't know of anybody, I'm sure there are a few. I don't know of anybody doing perinatal psychology research. And I would love for people to be doing that research so we could actually, say something substantial that's got some data behind it, right? Like Mexico, for instance,
Hmm.
and a few other countries have a huge amount of cesarean births.
Oh,
And we don't really know what that does. We have some idea. We have a little bit of speculation on it. Like I'm one of those cesarean born, but it's very big uncontrolled experiment.
yeah. Well, I know what Stan has said is that there's something about that fight through the birth canal that gives the immune system an extra boost. And kind of like a plant that doesn't have any struggle, it's the roots don't grow as deep. You grow a plant in an environment where there's no wind, there's no, everything it needs, it's totally protected. It doesn't develop a strong trunk, its roots are less strong. So, I don't know if it's quite as profound as that, but the idea that Stan had a pretty good explanation for it. I'll have to ask him. I can't, other than the strengthening of the immune system because of that struggle. I don't quite remember, but I think about a woman who's had a birthing center. Don't know if she still does. And many of the births were water, like in a tub or something, so
Right.
that it was a more gentle entry into the world. And I wonder about following those young people born in that method in terms of what kind of adults do they become?
Hmm.
What are their characters like? How do they respond to stress and fear and trauma? Are they less reactive? Are they less defensive? That would be interesting to look at.
Yeah. And I think important for our survival on the planet to understand this link because it seems to be a really important psychological factor. Yeah. It would be, I think, a grave error to underestimate the impact of this stuff on people.
Yes, and I think that is really the value of a rite of passage, which in a way holotropic breath work is, or a high dose psychedelic experience is, because it's that death rebirth experience. And so if the birth process isn't made gentler in some way, then at the very least to have a process for giving people a chance to revisit that experience and from a perspective that's more mature make sense of it and not have these unconscious fears driving us.
Mm, absolutely. So, what were some surprises in this kind of discovery process of making the film that came up for you? I'm sure at least a few things, either theoretically or historically, were really a big surprise for you.
Well, this is more on a personal level, but I
Sure.
didn't realize Stan's sense of humor and just I attended a engagement or a wedding celebration party for Stan and Brigitte with an old circle of friends, Michael Harner, who created the Foundation for Shamanic Studies,
Yeah.
Ralph Metzner, Richard Tarnas, Roger Walsh. His wife is no longer with us, Francis Vaughn. Anyway, quite a circle of people sitting together, and the stories they told, the crazy experiences they had, for all their seriousness and their remarkable academic achievements, they were a bunch of tricksters. Jack Cornfield, just amazing sense of humor, incredible stories. I'm not sure I'm allowed to share some of them, but just that the levity was equal to their dedication and seriousness. That it was really balanced.
It's important. And it's hard for us to see that without having personal interaction with those folks or, seeing them at a retreat. You kind of got a sense of it from, I went to a retreat years ago with Jack Cornfield and Stan.
Hmm.
And yeah, their relationship, it was quite clear there was a lot of humor between the two of them. And yeah, you could really get a sense of it. And I caught them later in life, but I could only imagine like 10 years before how funny they were.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, and I met Michael Harner. He taught me shamanic journey work, and such a sober, serious man. 150 people gathered, most of them either psychologists, psychiatrists, or therapists, and no jokes, no laughing, nothing. And then to sit there and watch him interact with Stan, one joke after another. And I was stunned. The first time they met, they were naked in a hot tub at Esalen.
right. That's pretty. I think that's a pretty common situation at Esalen, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's great. It's really cool. Yeah, I remember being at a retreat once, and I was just like shocked at how much nudity there was coming from like a conservative New England town. I'm like, oh no, like
Well,
what
and
am I gonna do here?
exactly. Well, and I remember going down to the baths and everybody's naked and walking around naked. And I said to Brigitte, I don't know where to look. All I see are penises. And she said, you just look at them. And after a while, you won't see them anymore. Because where do you look? It's so hard. But after a while, you do get over it. And I
Yeah.
think I think Esalen was a little crazy, though. They definitely had periods where things were perhaps a little out of control, but I think that era has passed.
Oh yeah, it's long gone. I think. Yeah, I've driven by Esalen a couple times. I never had the guts to pull in for some reason. I think you need an appointment to go, so maybe that was the reason. But I was always like, oh no, it's right there. Why haven't I gone? It's kind of weird because that's kind of like my Vatican, in a lot of ways. My infatuation with it, I think, is from decades ago. So I think it's just a lot different now than it was then as well.
It's a lovely setting. I've been there twice, once to participate in something, and then once to film Stan and people that had taken a course from him. And it is an amazingly beautiful place, but they very much control who can come on site. And
Mhm.
and the only way you really get on the property is if you've signed up for one of their programs. But yeah, no, I don't know if they still make the baths available after midnight. I'm not sure if that still happens, but it used to be the case that the public was allowed to come down at that time.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Cool. So you had the opportunity to run a really great series of promotional webinars, I guess we'll call them, or workshops to help promote the movie, and you got to partner with sorry if I forget his name, Mitch Schultz, that
Yes,
helped with was he the director for the Spirit Molecule film?
yes.
Yeah.
DMT
Yeah.
spirit molecule. Yeah.
So you had the opportunity to co-host a whole bunch of things with him, and can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, they're actually, I think we have more like close to 20 interviews with experts that went into our process of making the movie. Each one was anywhere from 20 minutes to almost an hour. Rick Doblin, 58 minutes. And so they were such interesting interviews. There were only moments that I could put into the movie, but I had always wanted to share the full length interviews with these experts. And so we created a weekly streaming series where these experts, the interview would be shown, and then
Mm,
almost all of them joined us afterwards for a live Q&A. And often the Q&As were more interesting than the interview because it was, where are we now? And questions that Mitch and I had for them, as well as from the audience. And we recorded all of those, and they are available through the website, thewayofthepsychonaut.com live stream archives. And that's under the watch menu. It's also on our landing page. You can just become a member of the website and you have access to all of them. they, for me, that represents the worldview that if humanity had the idea of perinatal matrices and dimensions of consciousness, would not be a stretch. We would embrace it easily.
Mm, yeah. So you started, well, okay. So COVID happened. That's not really a great thing for releasing a film, right?
Yes.
So you had to kind of revision a lot of how you're going to do this release and a lot of the publicity. So how did you play that?
Well, at the time, it was like, okay, let's reach out to conferences and get ready to travel and encourage community screenings around the country. And then COVID hit, and it's like nobody's going anywhere. And I remember saying to Mitch and Matt Zion, who handles our social media, I said, well, what is the earth trying to tell us? We're not meant to go anywhere. What do we have? We have the internet. So let's make this available for everybody. And let's share these expert interviews and let's see if they'll join us to talk about them afterwards. And that was basically, we were like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So we just started scheduling them out, and it was busy. It was a very busy summer, but we had anywhere from, I think, 6,000 to 15,000 views per streaming. And it was an amazing opportunity to reconnect with these masters, really, these elders, and share also the conversation with Ralph Metzner and Stan. Ralph passed before this film was released. Michael Harner passed before the film was released. We're going to be streaming a conversation that I filmed between he and Stan October 7th. And Martina Hoffman and her deceased partner, Robert Venosa, two amazing artists.
Yeah.
Were interviewed by Stan years ago, and she's releasing her film in the coming weeks. We filmed a conversation between she and Stan and Brigitte through our Zoom conversation that sort of touches on everything that's happened since that time. And we're going to be streaming that on September 30th. So we have a few more things we're sharing, but it just felt like the information that we were able to gather in the course of making this documentary really deserves to be shared. And so we just decided this is what we're going to do, and it's worked out beautifully.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I don't want to jump the gun because we still got some time left, but can people get the film now anywhere, or are there individual screenings happening?
It will be available for purchase and streaming beginning October 14th. And
cool.
if people go to the website, we're going to begin, trying to get the word out, and a press release should be going out shortly. But just go to the website. There'll be links to Apple TV, Google Play, Amazon Direct, Vimeo, OTT, and VOD. And we welcome people to host a screening. And I'm happy to join in for a Q&A afterwards. We're hoping people in their various communities might want to host a screening, and people like yourself with the knowledge of holotropic breathwork might be there to share more information. And as we're able, hopefully beginning to offer holotropic breathwork sessions.
That would be really cool. Yeah, I can't wait to be able to do breathwork again. It's been really hard to not be able to facilitate or attend workshops with folks.
Yeah,
I hope a lot of people are getting through. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are social creatures, and to be isolated, if we're lucky to have family members to interact with, that's helpful. But for those who aren't living with others, it's very difficult. Or even living with people that understand their deeper sense of themselves, that can be really difficult. But I should mention that Stan and Brigitte launched something called Grof Legacy Training, and it's allowing them to support breathwork practitioners and facilitators who want to teach what they've learned. And so Brigitte and Stan are supporting these people with training like yourself who want to now teach it. And they actually invited those facilitators and practitioners hoping to teach to share our streaming series over the course of the summer so that their students could begin to get this information. And once the movie is available, that they would show the movie to their students as a way of preparing them for what's possible in this deep work.
Yeah. Do you know anything about like why they started this foundation?
Well, there is, and sadly, many, many years ago, it's explained really beautifully in a letter penned by Stan, and also an explanation by Brigitte on their website, Grof Legacy Training. And essentially, Stan, when Christina Grof was still with us, they were in their 80s, and Stan was in his 80s, Christina was in her 70s, and their health was very poor. They really felt that they couldn't maintain the trainings. And so they gave the copyright, the business to Tav and Carrie Sparks. And over the years, they didn't agree with how the Sparks were doing things, but there was really no recourse for Stan because he'd given it away. And when they tried to reclaim it, there was a legal battle. And so
Oh, wow.
Eventually Stan felt, and Brigitte especially felt, that this isn't fair. They didn't agree with the pricing that had been set up, and they didn't believe that Stan's intellectual property was now belonging to the Sparks. And so they established another way of sharing that information and supporting people who have learned it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad they were able to make some developments to help reclaim some of that ability to teach. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm excited about some of the Grof Legacy Foundation moves. I just found out recently that mutual acquaintance of ours, Ren Butler,
oh yes,
is involved in Grof Legacy Grof Legacy Training Canada, which is also involved in the recent Therasil win, where some Canadians are getting access to psilocybin mushrooms for end-of-life anxiety type work.
Wonderful.
Which is really fantastic that Grof Legacy Foundation is getting tapped for that already.
Well, that's wonderful because, the truth of it is, a few years back, there were some folks from MAPS at the Women's Visionary Conference that was held at IONS and outside of Santa Rosa. And one of the women was describing the protocol that MAPS teaches their sitters for these to sit with somebody during a psychedelic-assisted therapy session. And someone stood up and said, that's holotropic breath work. That's the training that we're given to sit with people. And so the protocol of a sitter is really coming from the experiences of the breath work that came from Stan's experiences sitting for people in high dose sessions during his many years of research in Prague. So it's this belief in the wisdom of the psyche and the sort of midwife approach where you sit back and you allow the person to have that journey. And the people like yourself who've had the training have had many deep sessions of breath work or psychedelic experiences. And so personally that you'll survive it. And when the person you're sitting for goes into something deep, you have the knowledge of body work that you might apply, the patience, the belief that individual can get through it. And so it becomes such a powerful healing experience for the either the breather or the person in that psychedelic session.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I regularly say that I think holotropic breathwork training or very close variants are some of the best training you can get for psychedelic facilitation work. I just don't really know that you can learn this stuff in a lecture at a university somewhere without having a lot of hands-on experience. Just doesn't seem reasonable to me.
Oh, and Stan agrees with you 100%.
Cool. It's good to know. Yeah. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. Sometimes I feel like I'm stepping out of my lane, but realistically, I just don't see an argument to be made in the other direction. Like, certainly you need a lot of class time to be a good facilitator, but you need way more in-person time.
And that's really the truth of it, because I mean, Stan says this in the movie. Having watched it so many times in the course of editing it, I believe the
Mm.
exact words are, "You can't learn this through books. You have to experience it. The person who is the sitter has to have, or the facilitator has to have been personally in that deep death rebirth experience in order to trust that the breather or that person in the psychedelic session will survive it.
Mm.
Otherwise, you might panic and you might stop it. And Stan's belief is if you stop it, you have just stuck that person in the trauma that they were hoping to work through.
Yeah. Yeah. That's essentially what we teach as well. We talk a lot about how if you interrupt something with drug, you might really do some long-term damage to the person if they're deep in process and you just kind of abort it. Certainly you can resolve that stuff. It's just quite resource intensive to do that,
Well, and
unless you have access to a lot of breath work or something.
exactly. What's so interesting too is when we interviewed Rick Doblin. Rick wrote, he did a study. I think, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been his undergrad thesis or capstone, but he went back to research the Good Friday experiment where Timothy
Yeah.
Leary and I forget who else was involved, but they gave a bunch of theology students psilocybin and they put them in a religious setting and they wanted to see if they had a deep spiritual or religious experience. And pretty much everybody that Rick was able to track down had a wonderful experience. The only one who had a negative experience, he took his clothes off and ran outside, and they had to chase after him and grab him. I guess he was in a busy street, and they gave him Thorazine to shut it down.
Yep.
And that was the one negative experience because whatever he was expressing, whatever he was working through, got shut down. And that also showed Rick that they were unfairly positive about the results. They didn't want to acknowledge that it could be a dark journey. And Rick's belief and stands as well, and I'm sure you know, these dark journeys are where the true healing takes place.
Right. So we call it the Marsh Chapel experiment. Walter Pankey at the time was a grad student.
Okay.
And he designed the experiment. And Leary, Richard Albert, Ram Dass were there. For some reason, I feel like Metzner was there, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's true.
I don't, I'm not sure he was, Rick doesn't mention that, but yeah, no, it's true. And so this was, yeah, shutting it down is a very bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's pharma companies now trying to develop drugs that do just that. But I wonder what's going on there. If it's to actually shut down sessions or to make somebody feel comfortable that if they start getting very uncomfortable, they can get administered this drug.
See, I'm not aware of that, but what I did read recently was the idea of blending a certain amount of MDMA with LSD so that anxiety.
Yeah, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
The anxiety is a lot lesser for sure. And it might actually be the same group. So I have there's so many new pharma companies, it's hard to keep track. I think it's MindMed is the one that's doing this MDMA LSD or MDMA psilocybin combo in pharma. It's been used for ages in other scenes.
Candy flipping, right?
Yeah, right. Or with mushrooms, hippie flipping or whatever. And yeah, like long history of use. It seems less scary. It's really fun most of the time. But how do we relate to that? And I think it would be great for psychotherapy, but I get a little concerned when there's now drugs that, perhaps are safer than Thorazine to use in sessions, and how regularly could they be? And is that doing harm?
Well, it's interesting because Rick Doblin mentioned that MDMA has a window for the individual. Like, I'm going back to my youth, but there are other drugs like Quaaludes, for example, or
Sure.
other drugs that over time your body becomes tolerant to them, and you need more and more to get a reaction. But when it came to Quaaludes and other things like that, there's a toxic effect that begins to take place, and so it's actually very damaging for people. But with MDMA, the issue is over time, the more you use it, the less impact it has, and the dose has nothing to do with it. You cannot just up the dose; it just stops having an effect. So perhaps as an introduction to a psychedelic experience, especially for people who are older, it might not be a bad idea. I know the anxiety that I had occasionally when something was going really fast and very deep. But I agree with you in that the depth and that anxiety passes, and it's in the learning to get past that anxiety that we develop capacity for reflection and to move away from reactivity. So
Right.
I think you're missing maybe for the first trip just to say, okay, this is what you're in for. And next time we're not going to do this. So that,
Yeah.
so it's not a total shock, but, I just think, I know that I've learned, I think if I'd had my big ayahuasca experience before I had some of the higher dose LSD experiences, I'm not sure I would have handled it as well, because I
Right.
really thought I was dying. I thought I had overdosed, and there was a moment where I just said, well, what are you going to do? Here we
Yeah.
go, let go. And so it was fine. But I had already been through some very challenging experiences and survived them. So there's a part of me that knew that what really mattered wasn't going to die.
Right. It's it's an interesting balance in a lot of the breathwork trainings. A really common saying, let me know if you've ever heard this, is
Okay.
never pass up an opportunity for death and dismemberment. Has that come up for you yet?
I have not heard that. That's wonderful.
So it's like, when else is it safe enough for you to have this experience of death and dismemberment than like on the mat? It's, the only other scenario is quite dangerous where that might come up for you. And you can be curious and lean into how scary that is. Like, what does it feel like to have your, head cut off in that state, and go, okay, cool. I guess it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like contextualizing trauma and death.
exactly.
Helpfully. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you think about people who love to go on scary rides, and how shaken up can they be? How terrified can they be? You're just going inside for that experience. So it's I just think it's not that I love those experiences, and this is why they say that psychedelics aren't addictive, because I'm not, I'm just learning about archetypal astrology, and I've had what's that called? Pluto, Saturn conjunct opposite my sun for a number of years. Earlier, it was Saturn return. And so these are planets that are hard, difficult. Pluto's death and dismemberment and violence and, primordial energy. And so I basically had 5 years of death and dismemberment. Every single trip was just as rough as it could be. I'm not running back to do it again, I can tell you.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's yeah, it's just goofy to hear in the media sometimes. Oh, you're addicted to LSD. Oh, well, yeah, right. Sure. Like, I don't think that's really happening, but I do know that there are people that use it at kind of high doses every day, but I tend to think that their direct effect of that is quite diminished.
Well, and Stan found in their clinical trials that there needed to be a 2-week period between sessions for the drug to have its full effect. That
Right.
taken within that period of time, the brain's capacity to absorb it is diminished. The other thing that he found was that you can't OD on pure LSD because your brain can only absorb 600 micrograms. So people who think they're having some amazing experience because they took like 1,000 or something, you just wasted 400.
Yeah, I think the trick is it might just last longer on account of half-life in the body.
Maybe.
But yeah, perhaps the intensity won't go that much higher.
No. That was what Stan was saying. It's not going to kill you, So if you do it every day, it will have a diminished effect. It won't have its full effect. And so you're not really getting that experience.
Right. It's a really common thing in, not really common, so let me reframe, a fringe phenomenon that you hear about in kind of the Fish and Grateful Dead worlds of this idea of a thumbprint, where some sort of initiation into this group is that you lick your thumb and put it into a whole pile of crystal LSD and put it right on your tongue, right? And that's how you quote unquote earn your wings. And people ask me about that somewhat often, and I'm just like, I don't advise it. I don't think anybody should really do that. But if you're going to do that, like, make sure you have a month or two to recover, because you're not going to want to go to work the next couple days. Like, because I think your body is going to be trying to excrete that for 3, 4, 5 days at least.
I don't know enough about it. I mean, Stan understood they would do the blood test. I don't believe you can find it in someone's body. It passes through the body very quickly, from what I remember.
Right. Drug tests are not really reasonable for it.
Yeah.
If an employer wants to do one or something.
Yeah. The thing that can happen, like you're saying, is where did you go? If you do a high dose like that, like what Stan found was could be considered a hit, a lower dose, 100, anywhere from 70 to 125 would be basically just biographical or maybe seeing interesting things. As the dosages increase and with the increased number of sessions, people would go deeper and deeper and deeper. But the higher the dose, the darker the journey. And so a high dose is going to drop somebody into some very deep stuff, which can be disruptive. And again, without a support group around you to help you make sense of what you experienced, that can leave scars. Not scars, but that can, without the integration, that word you feel is being overused, without.
Only because I'm getting bored of it.
Of course.
I think it's appropriate.
Yeah. The integration, and that's what Fritjof Capra talked about, was, in fact, Fritjof Capra was saying that, and this is based, I believe, Arnie Nass is another person that influenced Fritjof, and he felt that mental illness was really the inability to integrate the two realities, the reality of a linear physical material world and a nonlinear energetic quantum or spiritual world, and that those two realities coexist simultaneously, and the inability to sort of live between them and navigate how they intersect is mental illness. And so the same thing goes with these psychedelic experiences. For many people, they might have severed their contact and experience of this physical dimension and existed entirely in this nonlinear energetic realm. And to bring that back and to make sense, especially if they went into deep emotional memories, ancestral stuff, past life, whatever, or birth memories that they don't even understand what they're in, how do you just come back and get back into daily life? That can be quite a challenging feat.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go back and talk to somebody with no experience and pretend like everything's the way it was last week when it was just totally different? Yeah.
Or talk to your family about it, and then they commit you.
Right.
And say this person had a psychotic break and they need to be on Thorazine for the rest of their life.
Yeah. It's a scary prospect.
Yeah.
All right. So we're at about an hour, Susan. I had a great time, but I want to make sure you have the ability to share anything that we might not have touched on?
Well, I think we pretty much covered everything. I just want to say how valuable I think Stan's contribution is, and how proud I am, or how, I guess, grateful I am to have worked with him in the creation of this film. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, because I wanted to take his theories, his discoveries, his contributions, and make them accessible and interesting, so that people could watch it and come away with an understanding that would hopefully inspire them to then go and do the deep work. And I hope people come to the website and visit the live stream archive page, so that they can gain a deeper understanding of all these amazing concepts that Stan participated in sharing during his time at Esalen and his ITA conferences.
Right. Yeah, I really loved it. And I hope more people find a passion for the work of Grof and some of his contemporaries, I guess, in that niche, that like Esalen incubator of what we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing. It's so rich. We've got a lot of recordings. We unfortunately lost a lot of papers because they had some fires, and Stan lost a lot of papers too, but there's still so much richness there.
Oh, definitely. And we need it now. I mean, really, we need it to get past the polarity of our current political systems, all of the upheaval, climate change. We have to, as a species, come to a place of deeper connection and understanding to the natural world and with each other. So this work makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And Susan, what is the website people can go to find out more?
Thewayofthepsychonaut.com.
Yeah, and you've got a great presence on social media. I think your Facebook group might be your strongest, or Facebook page.
Yes, there's quite a lot of information. The Facebook page is, to follow that and like it, so that you're kept abreast of what's happening. We announce everything through that, and encourage people to share their questions.
Yeah. Well, Susan Hess Logeais, thank you very much for joining us on Psychedelics today. And I really look forward to seeing this film get out to more and more people.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's been fun. I enjoy chatting with you.
And there you have it, Susan Hess Logeais, filmmaker. I loved that movie. My favorite piece of film on Stan to date. Really happy it's out there, and I hope more people watch it and understand why Stan is so important to Kyle and I, and the rest of the Stream Shadow community, and many, many other people as well. So thank you, Stan. Thank you, Susan. And yeah, again, Way of the Psychonaut, watch it. It's important. And, hopefully, we can do more live streams like we did before, but time will tell. So, again, heads up that Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists is on sale. You can learn more at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. It's an 8-week live supported program. Essentially, we have a lot of readings and videos to watch there, and we come together once a week for 8 weeks to discuss that material. We work you through a lot of material that's, theoretical, practical, ethical. There's a lot, and it's supported by a ton of masterclasses from experts in the field, and you get to hear about their subspecialties. What are they most expert at, and what would they like to teach you? And the reviews we've received are extraordinary. It's it's one of the best things I've ever created. Just really happy that so many people are loving it. And I think that's it for now, everybody. So thank you all for tuning in to Psychedelics today. Yeah, let us know what you thought of the episode. Email us, psychedelicsemail@gmail.com. And we will see you in a few more days on the Friday episode. Take care, everybody. Joe Moore, signing off.